Have you ever wondered why it is so incredibly hard to make a good habit stick? Or, for that matter, why it's almost impossible to break a bad one? Well, today we're going to dive into exactly that, using the brilliant ideas from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. We're going to break down the science behind getting just 1% better every single day.
I mean, it's a question we've all asked ourselves, right? You know the drill. It's New Year's or maybe just a random Monday morning, and we set these huge goals. I'm going to eat healthier. I'm going to exercise every day. I'm going to read a book a week. But then, what happens? A few weeks, maybe even a few days later, we're right back where we started. So, what is going on? Why is that pattern so incredibly hard to break?
Well, according to James Clear, the problem, it isn't you, it's your strategy. And that's a huge relief, right? We think that to get big results, we need to take some kind of massive, earth-shattering action. We try to change everything all at once. And that huge ambition, that is exactly what sets us up to fail. But here's where the book offers a completely different solution. And honestly, it's so simple, it's kind of radical. Forget about massive change. The real secret to success lies in this one tiny number, 1%. The whole idea is that these tiny, almost unnoticeable improvements, when you do them consistently, are what actually lead to remarkable, mind-blowing results. And that brings us to our first big idea, the 1% improvement rule. This is all about the surprising power of what are called marginal gains. You got to think of your small habits like atoms. On their own, they seem pretty insignificant, right? But when they start to compound, when they build on each other, that's when they create some incredible power. Okay, for a real-world example of this, just look at the British cycling team. For like 100 years, they were mediocre at best. But then in 2003, they hired a guy named Dave Brailsford. And he brought in this new strategy called the aggregation of marginal gains. Basically, his team broke down every single thing you could think of that goes into riding a bike, and then they improved each little part by just 1%. And I mean, everything. They didn't just redesign the bike seats. They tested massage gels. They hired a surgeon to teach the riders how to wash their hands properly to avoid colds. They even painted the inside of the team truck white. Why? Just so they could spot tiny bits of dust that might hurt the performance of the finely tuned bikes. The results? They were absolutely staggering. But all of this whole 1% idea, it's actually building towards something even bigger. And this, for me, is the real game changer. The reason most of our habits fail isn't because we lack motivation. It's because we're trying to change the wrong thing. We focus on what we want to achieve instead of focusing on who we wish to become. So think about it like this. Most of us start with an outcome-based goal. Something like, I want to lose 40 pounds. All the focus is on that finish line. But the book argues we should just flip that completely upside down and start with an identity-based goal. So instead, the focus becomes, I am the type of person who moves my body every day. You see that tiny shift? It changes everything. Because now your behaviors aren't just a chore, they are literally affirmations of who you are. James Clear puts it perfectly. He says, the ultimate form of intrinsic motivation is when a habit becomes part of your identity. Right? I mean, it's one thing to say you want something. It is an entirely different thing to truly believe you are that thing. Once your pride gets involved, you'll fight tooth and nail to maintain those habits. There's this fantastic story in the book about a guy named Brian Clark. He was a lifelong nail biter. He used all his willpower to stop for a little while, but then he did something kind of weird. He got his first ever professional manicure. And for the first time in his life, he looked down and saw that his nails looked healthy, attractive even, and he started to feel proud of them. He wasn't just a guy trying to stop biting his nails anymore. He became someone who takes pride in caring for his nails. That identity shift, that was everything. He never chewed them again. All right, so this next idea, this might be the most surprising one of all. We're always told that we just need more willpower, right? More self-control. But what if the secret to self-control has very little to do with control itself? What if it's actually all about your environment? It all starts with this classic idea from psychology. The equation basically says that our behavior is a function of who we are as a person in our environment. To put it simply, your environment is like this invisible hand that is constantly shaping your behavior. But here's the good news. You don't have to be its victim. You can be its architect. And if you want proof of how powerful this is, check this out. It's a famous study that looked at heroin addiction among U.S. soldiers during the Vietnam War. And the data is just shocking. For typical drug users who go to a clinic for treatment, the relapse rate is around 90%. 90! But for the soldiers who were addicted in Vietnam, when they got home, only 12% relapsed within 3 years. I mean, that difference is just wild. So, what on earth happened? Did these soldiers suddenly gain some kind of superhuman willpower? Nope, not at all. It was simply that when they came home, they were in a completely different environment, one that was totally stripped of all the cues, all the triggers that prompted their drug use in the first place. When the context changed, so did the habit. It was that simple. And this all leads to this incredibly powerful insight from the book. Disciplined people are better at structuring their lives in a way that does not require heroic willpower and self-control. Just let that sink in for a second. The people we think of as having the best self-control, they're usually just the ones who have to use it the least. Why? Because they're masters at staying out of tempting situations. Okay, so that's all great in theory, but how do we actually apply this stuff? Let's get practical. It is time to start designing a system for ourselves, one that makes our good habits not just easy, but pretty much inevitable. It's a concept called priming your environment. The whole goal is to reduce the friction, the number of steps between you and your good habits. So if you want to exercise in the morning, don't leave it to chance. The night before, set out your workout clothes, your shoes, your water bottle. You want to eat a healthy breakfast? Put the skillet on the stove before you go to bed. Every little step you remove makes the good choice the easy choice. And here's another brilliant, super low-tech way to make your progress visible and satisfying. It's called the paperclip strategy. There is the stockbroker Trent Dursmith, who started each day with 2 jars on his desk. One had 120 paperclips in it, the other one was empty. After every single sales call he made, he'd move one paperclip from the full jar to the empty one. And he wouldn't stop working until all 120 clips were in the second jar. That simple visual cue created this incredibly satisfying feedback loop, and it built massive momentum. But okay, let's talk about the long haul. How do you stay motivated when that initial burst of excitement starts to fade? I think we all know that feeling. Well, the final key is designing habits that actually pull you in for good. And the book has a great name for this, the Goldilocks rule. It basically says that we humans feel peak motivation when we're working on a task that is of just manageable difficulty. Think about it. If something is too easy, we get bored. If it's way too hard, we get discouraged and give up. The key is finding that sweet spot, that challenge that's, well, just right. Take the legendary comedian Steve Martin. He wasn't some overnight success. He spent nearly 2 decades constantly operating right on the edge of his abilities. He started out doing 5-minute routines in these tiny, empty clubs. Then he expanded to 10 minutes, then 20. He was always pushing himself just enough to stay engaged, but not so much that he'd burn out. And he stuck with it for 18 years because the challenge was always manageable. So what's the big takeaway from all this? If there's one idea to remember, it's this. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. It really is all about those tiny changes, those marginal gains, and the incredible power of compounding interest. And that just leaves us with one final question to think about. What is the one tiny, 1% change that could start your journey today?